What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, once again with my guy Morgan. And Morgan, we finally get to put the Ravens game behind us. We did the film study. We got to relive that pain for a day. Now we get to look ahead, and we get to look ahead to the Las Vegas Raiders. And we're gonna do what we always typically do. We're gonna preview and just look ahead to some of their big time players. And I'm gonna say, listen, based off what their record looks like, this does look like a game where the Lions should be able to get back on track. But when we start to dive into the tape, there are some players and there are some things that this team does have to be wary of when they go into this Monday Night Football game, right?
Yeah, it's like we've been saying since the beginning. It's the NFL. That's the reason there's a movie Any Given Sunday, is because any given Sunday, any team can lose. Like, I'm sure many people didn't have the Vikings beating the 49ers and, so on and so forth. So, yeah, they're having a tough time. I'm pretty sure a lot of Raiders fans don't like their head coach, Josh McDaniels, excuse me. So they have their own issues, but like we're going to get into today, we know they got some talented players on that side of the ball too, on either side of the ball, excuse me.
Yeah, so let's start with the offensive side of the ball, and let's look ahead at one of their key players, one of their key acquisitions for this Raiders team. We got to talk about Davante Adams. And when talking about Davante Adams, I don't know where to start, and I don't know where to stop either, Morgan, because there's so many things that Davante does well. And I think this first play is a good example of just one of the things that he does really well in terms of just, having that veteran presence and understanding, how to run routes so well.
Yeah, he's been doing this forever, and he's one of those players that still keeps me up at night from his time in Green Bay and all his, all the hay he made against the Lions through those years. So you'll see him go in motion, settles down right on the numbers, right there at the 40, and just is intelligent enough to understand what coverage the Steelers are in and its zone. And so he gets beyond 29 and gets enough depth to make this throw, easy enough for Garoppolo. Still a really good throw by Jimmy G. And just, is reading that deep third player, right? So it's, he's reading that deep third player, turns his hips, and just makes it an easy throw and catch. Sorry, I misspoke earlier too. Minka Fitzpatrick was the defender closest to the line of scrimmage, and then 29 ended up being that deep third.
Yeah, and so this is something that, when I saw this play going through the film, this is something that really kind of stood out to me because this feels like something that the Lions would do. This looks like how the Lions would try to play and cover a guy like Davante Adams. You're trying to kind of bracket him a little bit, have someone covering him deep, have someone covering him, just shallow enough, and then challenge Jimmy G to make a precise throw, which he does here. But like you said, Davante's smart enough to understand zone concepts, and he's just going to find that pocket in your zone and kind of settle down and make himself available.
Yeah, and he's been all pro multiple times for many reasons, right? He's a really, really nuanced route runner, has a crazy release package for being someone. He's a big physical receiver. He's never been necessarily the fastest player on the field. He's still fast enough. Don't get me wrong. He can leave you, as we'll see a little bit here later. But yeah, he's just a really complete receiver, and he's going to be someone that Aaron Glenn is going to have a plan for from the jump, right? Like there can't be any of this scrambling like there was in Baltimore where they blinked twice and they were down 14-0. So, come ready. You're not facing a former MVP at quarterback this time in Lamar, and I'm hoping come ready. Like Dan Campbell said all week, right? Like they're going to be ready to play after that. What happened in Baltimore? I'm really hoping that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, this is the type of player that, again, if you're not ready, if guys are not on the same page, if someone's looking to be a hero in a certain situation, you have a guy, a veteran, like you said, all pro level wide receiver that can find ways of taking advantage of you. And in Jimmy Garoppolo, like you said, is he a Lamar Jackson? Is he a former MVP? No. But when, protection is sound, when play calling is spot on, and then you have a player of that caliber on the outside, pitch and catch becomes very easy for you. And speaking of play calling, again, the Raiders, I don't think they do a lot to really confuse, their opposing, the teams that they're going against, but they're not afraid to get risky. They're not afraid to shake things up a little bit and try to lull you asleep and then take their shots when they can. And this play here, once again highlighting Davante Adams as well, is a really good example of that. This was 4th and 1. The Raiders had tried to go for it, on a 3rd and 1, tried to sneak it, didn't quite work. So they came back on a 4th and 1, and this is what they came with. And the Lions are going to have to be ready for things like this.
Yeah, and he gets manned up with 29 again, here towards the bottom of our screen. And what's going to happen is there's a failure to replace on the back end for the Steelers. And what I mean by that is when we get back to the start here, at the top of your screen, that corner will need to get high because of Minka Fitzpatrick coming down and trying to cut that crosser to Jakobi Meyers. So when Minka comes down, that corner at the top of the screen needs to get high. So right here, he needs to be that deep safety that's going to be help for anyone over the top. And because he's late and he's just now making that decision, it just gives Garoppolo so much room to make this throw. And it's not a perfect throw, but just because it's Davante Adams and it's a good enough throw, it gives Adams a chance to adjust to the ball and make the catch. So yeah, and the Lions had a couple of these last week where it was just someone trying to play outside of the scheme and outside of their assignment, or a miscommunication pre-snap or post-snap. So these are things the Lions are going to have to be crisp and clean on, because like you just said, Miko,
by any stretch, but he's good enough. He's sound enough in his technique. He's sound enough in understanding how to get leverage and how to create space. And he's athletic enough to, again, if you don't have a 4-3 corner, he can probably outrun them and get the leverage that he needs. And like you said, not a perfect throw, but Jimmy G, not pressured, not having to rush his mechanics, is able to still just kind of lob it up there to him and just trust that his all-pro receiver is going to make a play.
Yeah, and he could have thrown that probably to the middle of the end zone, or even the back of the end zone, and let Davante run under it, but he just kind of put it in the vicinity, and the DB wasn't able to make a play, like you said. So, yeah, it's Jimmy G's accurate if you give him time back there to decipher what's going on. He has had his issues with turning the ball over. He does have 8 interceptions on the year.
Yeah,
but he was in the Kyle Shanahan offense in San Francisco. But there's still a reason he went to two Super Bowls.
Yeah, 2 Super Bowls.
Didn't win any, but still got there. So. Yeah, good enough player. It's the reason he's starting in the NFL. So, yeah, I'm really hoping everything needs to get cleaned up in the back end for the Lions, and even at the linebacker position.
Yeah, and so we've talked about Davante's savviness when it comes down to just being a technician in his route running, or at least understanding zone coverage and understanding where to settle down in zones. We've talked about how, again, he's more athletic than you probably think he is. And again, still being able to show off that veteran presence to be able to create space on deep routes. And Jimmy G, again, give him time, give him, enough, ability or at least enough space to be able to make a play. He can get the ball there. The last thing we got to talk about with Davante is his route running, because again, I think that's one of the things that he's almost credited the most with, is just, again, for his size, he has really good feet and he can break down at the drop of a dime. And even if it's supposed to be really good coverage against a really good corner, like we're about to see against Patrick Peterson here, Davante will still put you on skates and put you at risk of seriously injuring yourself if you're not on your P's and Q's.
Yeah, man. I mean, at this stage in his career, Pat Pete isn't the all-world corner he once was, but he's still a vet. He's still very savvy. He understands where he's supposed to be in the Pittsburgh defense, but. Yeah, this is kind of where you get caught between a rock and a hard place playing against a receiver like Davante Adams, because you don't want to give him as much cushion as Pittsburgh is giving him here, which is like almost 8 yards. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if you try to jam him and you're not Jalen Ramsey or one of those corners that has the long arms and the acceleration and the shiftiness to stay with him, because like we talked about, Adams has a elite release package. His footwork's crazy. So if you do jam him and you want to play bump and run with him, you get risk of being beaten at the line of scrimmage and then kind of open yourself up to a big play, be it up the seam or down the sideline. So it's kind of a catch-22. I'll be anxious to see how they approach it.
Yeah, because again, I know people are going to see these types of clips and just like, oh, well, it's simple, just jam him.
Mhm.
Many corners have tried. All right. That is
Yes.
a strategy that many corners and defensive coordinators have tried. And it's not as simple as you might think it is. So this is something that I think the Lions are going to be careful of. I'm sure Aaron Glenn has a solution to this, right? I don't expect them to defer too drastically from what they've been doing because they've been playing a lot of off coverage when they're going up against receivers that can be potential deep threats. I don't expect that to change this week with them going up against Davante Adams and the Raiders. Now, one thing that I do think is going to be very interesting, though, is, and Morgan, feel free to correct me. I'm not sure the Lions have gone against a duo quite like Davante Adams and Jakobi Meyers so far this season.
They've gone through a couple. Like this is another really good duo, right? Like you went through, a Seattle. They had DK and uh, Jackson Smith and Jigba and Tyler Lockett. So
Yeah,
that's
so that's a nice trio. Yeah.
That's a nice trio, but then it's different things, right? Like Devontae brings a different skill set than DK does in terms of like the routes he runs and how he gets open and how he wins. So yeah, it's an interesting thing because it's true. You have Devontae who's a true, you can operate him out of the slot, but he's going to be really really good on the outside, out near the boundary. And then Meyers is going to make his hay as a quick, speedy change of pace guy, out of the slot primarily.
Yeah, and I forgot we also went against Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. That was another really good duo.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would put Thielen and Chark in this category. So I would say that this is probably the second or third best wide receiver duo that the Lions are going to see this year because as dangerous as Davante Adams is, I think Jakobi Meyers is just as dangerous and he can be just as a big of a problem if you're Jerry Jacobs and you're going to be pulling the task of having to cover Jakobi Meyers, you're not getting a day off. You're getting just as much of a handful of a really difficult receiver to cover. And I think this play here is a really good example of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too with Las Vegas. Oh, I almost messed up and called them Oakland. I'm sorry. Sorry, Oakland. I wish you guys still had a football team. But yeah, with Myers and Davante Adams, they are both bigger guys. So like Jakobi Meyers, because of his skill set and how teams use him, you would think he's not a bigger guy, but he's 6'2", 200 pounds. So it presents a different set of problems because both of them are big enough and physical enough to beat up on smaller guys, yet fast enough they can both really run. So yeah, like you said at the top, Miko, if Jimmy G has time like this is a clean pocket, man. That thing is super clean. So it can't be like the Lions are going to have to muddy those waters so Garoppolo doesn't get comfortable like this. Like, let's pause it right here when he hits the back of his drop. Bam! Like, my goodness.
Yeah, no one within what, a good 4 or 5 yards of him at this point.
Yeah, this is beautiful here. And then it allows him to step up. He climbs the pocket and throws a dart. And yeah, good tackle on the outside by 27. And then the route too here. It's a really good route by Meyers. Corner. He waits for 27 to really commit. And 27 is damn near at the hash when Meyers bends this outside and makes it an easy throw for Garoppolo.
Yeah, so again, you definitely have to worry about Davante Adams. But again, if you get too focused on him, Jakobi Meyers can come in there and dice you up as well. And it's not just in the open field because I can't remember if I said this already, but Jakobi Meyers does lead the Las Vegas Raiders in receiving touchdowns, not Davante Adams. And when you see this next play, it's a good indication of why, because he's just as big of a threat in the red zone. And honestly, Morgan, it's kind of like what you were talking about, right? He's bigger than you would think for a number 2 wide receiver. They already have a really big threat in Davante Adams, but then Jakobi Meyers comes in at 6'2", and he understands how to use his body just as well in these type of red zone situations.
Yeah, and they do a good job here. So they have trips the opposite side of Meyers, so he's down here by himself, one-on-one. And this is just a good release, and he gives himself room by the boundary, and good ball by Garoppolo. I'll give Garoppolo his flowers here. He puts it on the outside, on the back shoulder, excuse me. So really only a place that Jakobi Meyers can get it. Yeah, good throw and catch, gets up, lets the DB know about it. But yeah, really simple concept here. A good, again, excuse me, good protection from the Las Vegas offensive line. So yeah, efficient.
And the thing that's funny about this is that Davante Adams actually wins on this route. Like, so it's crazy to think that on a team that has Davante Adams, you don't have to go to him in the red zone because you have a guy like Jakobi Meyers that is just as capable of winning just as easily and being able to make these tough catches, and has the swagger to let your DBs know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a good design because it really puts the linebacker for Denver in a stress ball, because you'll see Josh Jacobs. He runs what is essentially a Texas route out of the backfield, right? So that linebacker has to make a decision, either kind of stand put and kind of sit at the back of the end zone and be where Davante ends up, or come down and try to make a play on the Texas route. And then at the same time, you have Jakobi running that fade there for the back shoulder. So kind of gives Garoppolo three options, legit options for a score there. So I do like that design.
Yeah. And so again, we speaking of Josh Jacobs, right? We don't necessarily have any clips for him in this week's breakdown. Really wanted to focus on the two wide receivers that they have, because I do think with a Josh McDaniels offense, obviously, yes, they're going to want to run the ball, and Josh Jacobs is going to be a huge part of that. They've struggled to do that at a very high clip to this point. Josh Jacobs has yet to eclipse 100 yards rushing. Hopefully, knock on wood, that continues this week, against the Lions, and the Lions have been really good about defending the run outside of that Ravens game. And so hopefully, again, getting back to that, making things difficult for Josh Jacobs. But he is someone that you have to be mindful of when it comes down to, how this offense is going to operate. They're going to try to run the ball. They're going to try to go to their play action. It's very similar to what the Lions do, right?
Yeah, it is. And, you think about where McDaniels comes from with, the Belichick tree and the, New England. So yeah, they want to get you in favorable down and distances, just like any other offense. They don't want to put Garoppolo in too many like third and long situations, because that is when things can get hairy for him in terms of like making bad decisions with the football. But yeah, their offensive line's played well this year so far, Miko. They have 5 good starters. We just saw a couple instances there where they were giving Jimmy like crystal clean, pristine pockets to work out of there. So yeah, Lions got to come ready to defend the run, because ideally you stop the run for Las Vegas and you end up getting them in lots of third and long situations. And then hopefully Aaron Glenn can start throwing some of those elaborate blitz packages at Garoppolo, heat him up.
Absolutely. And speaking of, being in third and long and allowing your pass rush to possibly be a threat, we are going to kind of transition over to the Vegas Raiders, defense, where there's a guy on that side that if the Lions are looking and watching tape, they don't want to be in third and long, because a guy like Maxx Crosby is going to eat. And this first play is one. This did get called back by a penalty, but I still wanted to include it because Max is fun to watch. I'm just going to say it like that. Max is a fun football player to watch, especially if you're watching pass rushing. He is there's a reason why he's considered one of the better pass rushers in the league.
Yeah, he's got it all. Big Mac guy. So I'm very proud that he went to Eastern Michigan. Shout out EMU. But yeah, he gets off the ball like crazy here, Miko. This right tackle for the Chargers had a tough day against Max. Gets off the ball, bends the corner, quick little rip. Crosby's hands are really active always. That's kind of like one of his trademarks. Those hands are active. So you'll see, gets off the ball, swipe, rip, and then he just rounds the corner. So for being a bigger, taller guy, he can bend the corner pretty well. He's got good ankle flexion and is able to bend pretty well. But yeah, poor Justin Herbert here never even sees him.
Or Justin Herbert, like he doesn't even get the luxury of a nice form tackle. He gets like double chopped to the chest by Crosby here. And like I said, this was a sack fumble, but it got called back due to an offsides penalty. But this is just a good illustration of just how dangerous Max can be. If your right tackle isn't on their P's and Q's, if Penei Sewell, for some reason isn't on top of his game, Maxx is going to take advantage of that because this right tackle very sloppy in their technique, and I'll leave it at that because when we play the Chargers, I'm pretty sure we'll get into it more in depth, but very sloppy technique from the right tackle.
Yeah, it doesn't get enough depth in his pass set, and then reaches, which is what Maxx wants, so he can beat those hands and rip underneath you. And yeah, once that right tackle, once 79 reaches, it's over. And then I'm really happy that Rashawn Slater ended up leaving this play healthy because this was scary. If you watch the left tackle here at the end. Eesh.
Yeah, Maxx Crosby is a dangerous man for your entire offensive line. Whether you're blocking him or not, you need to be on the lookout for what he can possibly do to your offensive line because Taylor Decker may find himself on the wrong end of a play just because Maxx Crosby is out here, wreaking havoc on the right side. But like I said, that's one play where, again, didn't quite necessarily go the Raiders' way because it did get called back by a penalty. But this Chargers game is the reason I highlighted this game. Maxx still came out of this game with 2 sacks. And the one that we're about to look at now is very reminiscent of the one that gets called for a penalty. And again, it showcases a lot of the same things that Morgan was talking about. He has great explosion out of his stance. He has great hands and really good bend to be able to recognize where the quarterback is and understand when to break off his rush to get back to the quarterback.
Yeah, you'll hear defensive coaches a lot refer to it as get off. So that's the defensive lineman's ability to get off the ball and get upfield and stay low. So Maxx definitely has elite get off. Crazy twitchy athleticism for being a big guy. And this is that rep he had earlier, to your point too, Miko, like it didn't count in the box score, but those reps get banked in that right tackle's memory, right? 79's memory. So he's like, oh my goodness, this guy is getting off the ball like a person possessed. So I really need to do better this time. And you'll see here, he does a little bit better in terms of getting depth on his pass set, but he's just shuffling his feet. He's really high. And yeah, that's not a good rep, and especially against someone who's as good as Maxx Crosby.
Yeah, man. I mean, again, like you said, Maxx was getting off faster than a teenager with a Cinemax, subscription. Like it like on late night Cinemax, like it was insane. And the thing that's crazy about this play specifically, I'm gonna stop it right here in a second. They eventually realized, like, yo, our right tackle's getting worked over a little bit. So let's give him some help. Let's throw a tight end over there. Gerald Everett wanted no parts of Maxx. He wanted no parts of helping when it came to chipping or anything. I don't know if I've ever seen less effort given in a chip than what Gerald Everett was giving whenever he had an opportunity to chip Maxx Crosby.
Yeah, and it could be coached this way just because like they probably don't expect much from him. Really, you have him out there in line just to keep Maxx a little wider, just to widen his stance and make him run a little further to get to Justin Herbert. So you could be right. It could be a lack of effort, but it also could just be touch. Like Gerald, legitimately, just give him a little shove and give 79 here a chance to catch his breath. But it doesn't matter. Gives him the little chip, and he's able to easily, once again, he just wins the edge against 79. So he gets that little chip, and then 79 tries his best. He's shuffling his feet, and he's reaching the whole time. And it just makes it really easy for Maxx to get underneath him and get to the quarterback.
I'm gonna say this: if that's a chip, then that's the most generous chip that I think any tight end has ever given a defense. Because that looked more like a pat on the back. That looked more like a hey, go get him, champ.
Nope. It could, and some of those coaches will, coach it that way, but just because they know, like, do I really, is Gerald Everett gonna make life difficult for Maxx Crosby? Probably not, but you could be right. He looked like he was bummed once he saw that he got sacked. He like threw his head back.
Like I probably could have given more of an effort there. And I say that just because, like, listen, any Lions fan that's ever seen Aiden get chipped, Aiden gets chipped. Like
chips. Yeah, those are real
like
chips.
They really be trying to like take his head off in those chips. So I don't know. Gerald Everett, if that's how the Chargers are coaching it, I just hope that Justin Herbert has a really good insurance policy every time he plays the Raiders. Because
100%, man. He got to play him twice a year too. And it's a good point, Miko, because people don't think of it this way, but if you like try to think of it from the pass rusher's perspective or the tackle's perspective, right? So like if you are Maxx Crosby and you do eat a couple of those real chips, say like Sam Laporta catches him one time and like really chips him, like rocks his stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
Those are the ones as a pass rusher you remember, because you're like, it could be 3rd and long and late in the, in the 4th quarter, but I also know Laporta's right there again, so I'm at least going to be wary of where he's at because I don't want to get my stuff cleaned up. So, it's one of those things it's like a cat and mouse game as a pass protection unit and as a pass rushing unit.
Right. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying before, right? When you're having a chip out there, you're hoping to, slow that player down. If you get some real efficient ones, even if you don't chip, right? It's going to be in the memory bank of like the last time he came in motion, he tried to take my head off. I need to at least have my head on a swivel. So maybe he's not as aggressive in his pass rush.
Yep.
But in a situation like this, apparently that message was not given to Gerald Everett, because the next opportunity he had to chip Maxx Crosby, it kind of went the same way.
Gerald. Look, they're doing the same thing though, right? So another instance here, they have Everett in line, at least just to widen Crosby's path to Herbert a little bit in theory. But here they run a game. So the tackle, number 69, is going to do a good job of occupying both blockers simultaneously, 68 and 79, the right guard and right tackle. And then 68 notices it's a game, but he's about a second and a half too late, because by the time he spins around, Crosby's on top of Herbert and getting another sack. That man's racking him up.
Yeah, man. So this was his 2nd sack of the day. And this play is one of those plays where, Dan Campbell was talking to the media this week, and when asked about Maxx Crosby, he was like, yo, he had a hard time thinking of things that he doesn't do well, but then he also made a point to, call out like, listen, this is a guy where your entire offensive line has to be mindful of him. And I think it's plays like this, when you have these types of stunts, it's not just your tackles that have to have an eye on him. Your guards have to have their head on the swivel too, because, he could just as easily loop around and make a beeline for your quarterback.
Yeah, and Las Vegas is going to run stunts in games like these because they want to get him, at the quarterback and have him making plays. And I'll say this, the Lions need to come ready to play, because this could be a game. A, it's Monday night. B, it's in Detroit. And if you didn't know, Crosby played at Eastern Michigan, like we said earlier. His mom is actually from the east side of Detroit, where I live. So he's got some ties, so he could have some extra people here at this game. So yeah, he could be having some extra juice, and he's not one to need extra juice. He's one of those guys who comes ready to play anytime he steps onto the field.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't want to say this is the Raiders defense in a nutshell, right? Like Maxx is by far their best player, but they do have some other good players on this defense as well. Number 41, their middle linebacker, is a guy that, will absolutely make plays, both in the run game. There was a couple good, snaps that I saw where he drops in coverage really well.
That's actually Robert Spillane, Western Michigan Bronco. I remembered that, but I had to look it up. But yeah.
So look, you have a Western and Eastern Michigan guy. Both guys are going to be coming back home, to a certain degree, playing the Lions. Marcus Peters, you still have him as a corner. And this Raiders defense, while they aren't necessarily great against the run per se, they have technically been rated fairly highly when it comes down to pass coverage. And so, Morgan, when you kind of hear that, what does your mind kind of go to in terms of like this Lions offense and what they kind of need to be on the lookout for?
I want this to be another game where the Lions front, their offensive line and their ground game imposes their will on an opponent. So I want this to be another game. I know Montgomery's likely not going to play, obviously. I want this to be a career game for Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, shout out. Like, remember that 2011 game? Some of y'all might be too young, but I turned 21 on this night. But in 2011, the Lions started the year 5-0, Monday Night Football against the Bears. Javed Best had like an 88-yard touchdown run. I want something like that from Gibbs. I want him to get into the second level, show us that world-class speed. And, if you do that to Las Vegas a couple times, they're going to have to start bringing extra guys down into the box to slow. Because the Lions' ground game, when it's going, it is like that. Like, the Lions have a top-ranked offensive line for a reason. They're elite. So that's what I want to see, Nico. I want to see like a 30 carry, from Craig Reynolds, Gibbs, everybody else, like 200-yard performance. That's what I want.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I think this is a game where, again, coming off of the loss that the Lions had against the Ravens, again, not trying to overlook the Raiders by any stretch because, like we just outlined, they have guys, they have some legitimate like Pro Bowl, All Pro level talent on both sides of the ball. Um, but I think the Lions are going to come into this game, and I think they're going to have a point to prove. They've heard the chatter, right? People calling them frauds, saying that they're not really one of the best teams. And so I don't think this is going to just be one of those games where it's like, hey, we just want to get a win. I do think this is going to be one of those games where it's like, we want to also make a statement. And so I think I think you're going to see a much more physical defense, specifically from the defensive line. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is he's going to be running for his life. And by no stretch am I saying that, like, I think the Lions are going to go out there and try to hurt him, but he's had his battles with injury. So I wouldn't be shocked by at any point if we don't see Aiden O'Connell in this game if he takes one too many hits in the pocket. And then I think from an offensive perspective, I think you're right. I think this team is going to try to just grind it out on the ground, and again, just be more physical than this Raiders team. And specifically try to keep Maxx Crosby out of those 3rd and long situations so that they don't have to worry about him teeing off on Jared Goff 1 week before they go into the bye.
Yeah, all great points, Miko. I would say that's how you could really phrase it there if you really wanted to boil it down to a simplistic approach on either side of the ball. Heat up Garoppolo or whoever's playing quarterback for the Raiders, get them off their spot. Don't allow them to get into a rhythm, hit them, get them on the ground, be it sacks, hurries, pressures, and then offensively impose your will. And that can mean a multitude of things. Like if you start imposing your will and maybe you can start taking shots once that safety walks up, right? And you can get behind their defense, be it to St. Brown or Josh Reynolds or JMO or whoever it be, Laporta. So I think the Lions, like you said, Miko, come ready to play. Everyone sounds like they're very focused coming off of the Baltimore ugliness. So I'm ready. I hope Ford Field's going to be rocking. I'm going to be there. I'm hoping we get up to like the 120, 125 decibel range. So it's going to be fun.
I hope so. Right. Night before Halloween. Hopefully we get more treats than tricks this year, this week. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see just again how excited and how rocking Ford Field will be. And yeah, man, I think the Lions get back to their winning ways this week. Going into the bye, I think they are going to finish this game, be 6-2, and going into the bye, we're going to be talking about again how this team can continue on this trajectory to locking up this division and hopefully, getting a really high seeding in the playoffs.
Yes, sir. Just start stacking them wins, right? Get this one, get healthy over the bye, go get some sunshine. It's going to start getting cold here in Detroit and Michigan, so go get some sunshine. Hopefully the Lions players can get to Cali, get to Florida, get some vitamin D, come back rested and refocused. But first, got to take care of business against Las Vegas, like you said.
Absolutely. So, guys, that's going to do it for this week's film study. Let us know in the comment section below anything that you guys are specifically concerned or confident about going into this game, whether it be as a Raiders fan or as a Lions fan. We would love to hear from both sides and just get an idea of like what you guys are thinking and how you're feeling going into this Monday Night Football game. It's going to be exciting. The whole country is going to be watching. It's a great time, again, to be a Lions fan and to be able to have this level of spotlight going into the week. Also, if you're looking for any more coverage or any more inside information on this matchup or any other articles that we've been writing on the Lions, be sure to head over to prideofdetroit.com where you can check out all the latest articles that have been posted. And last but not least, we cracked the 10K mark. We're marching along to our next subscriber goal. And if you guys want to help us get there, just hit that subscribe button. Be sure to hit that notification bell. Also, if you've already done those things, share this channel with somebody else that hasn't, because we would love to be able to expand our reach, continue to grow this community, and just make this a really cool and fun place to be able to root for our home team. So with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch. Catch you in the next one.